They said the children never cried. Not once. Not when their mother vanished from the kitchen table in the middle of breakfast. Not when the police came, filling the little farmhouse with the sour smell of wet boots and cigarette smoke. Not when the neighbors whispered that God had cursed the family for something unspeakable. They just stood there, two pale, glass-eyed siblings, clutching hands so tightly their knuckles whitened, watching every adult in the room as if taking mental notes. The boy's name was Elijah. The girl's name, well, that depends on who you ask. Some records call her Ruth. Others, Sarah or Clara. It's as if her identity kept shifting, as if she wanted it that way. And if you follow the story to its end, and you must, you'll understand why even now, no one can say for sure who she really was. The first police report about them was filed on January 14th, 1972, in a town so small it doesn't even appear on most maps anymore. It said only this: 2 minors found alone, house cold, food untouched, possible foul play. What it didn't say was that there were scratches on the inside of the front door, long, desperate scratches, all at knee level, and that the children, when asked what had happened to their mother, gave the exact same answer, word for word, in a flat, almost mechanical tone. She went where the bad people go. For decades, this case was filed away under Unsolved. But Unsolved doesn't mean forgotten, not by everyone, not by the people who lost something because of these children, especially not by me. You see, I'm not telling you this as some random voice narrating a creepy mystery for fun. I'm telling you because I knew them. I knew what they were capable of, and I know what they took from me. They say revenge is a dish best served cold, but I don't think that's true. Revenge works best when it's slow, when it seeps into every breath you take, every choice you make, until you can't tell where you end and the need for justice begins. And these siblings, these things, have been breathing my air for far too long. But before I can tell you how it ends, you have to understand how it began. The first time I saw Elijah and the girl, it wasn't in person. It was in an old VHS tape from a church gathering in '72. Everyone's laughing, eating, passing plates of ham and potatoes, and there they are, standing in the corner, motionless. Not shy, no. Shyness has a softness to it. They were calculating. The tape flickers. In one frame, they're watching the crowd. In the next, their heads snapped toward the camera, like they knew I'd be watching decades later. When the local sheriff first questioned them, he said it felt less like talking to children and more like being interviewed by them. He asked where their father was. They didn't answer. He asked who was taking care of them now. Elijah said, "We take care of ourselves. Always have. Always will." That's when people started to notice the odd things. The fact that they never seemed to eat, though food would disappear from pantries and livestock from farms nearby. The way they could vanish from sight in a heartbeat. The fact that no one could find a single birth certificate for either of them. There's a theory that they weren't born, that they were made. And if that's true, then the question becomes, made by who? And for what purpose? The next time they crossed my life, it was 1987. I was a rookie deputy in another county, chasing a lead on a break-in. The call came in as petty theft, but when I arrived, the scene was wrong. The family's dog was missing. The chicken coop was empty, and every mirror in the house had been smashed. The owner, pale and shaking, told me he'd caught a glimpse of the culprits. 2 figures, one tall, one shorter. They moved like shadows, but their faces were pale as bone, eyes dark and flat like a predator's. "Kids," he said, still trembling. "They look like kids." I didn't believe him. I didn't want to believe him, until I found a scrap of paper on the floor, written in a child's scrawl. "We remember what you did." That's when I knew. They hadn't stopped. They hadn't aged. And worse, they were hunting people. Now, here's the thing I need you to understand. This isn't just a mystery. It's a trap. If you keep watching, you'll start to see them too. You'll notice the flicker in the corner of your eye, the pale figure just beyond the edge of the streetlight. And maybe that's exactly what they want. But if we're going to stop them, if we're going to make them pay for every life they've ruined, every family they've shattered, we have to finish the story. We can't stop halfway. That's what they count on. people turning away when it gets too dark. So if you're here with me now, stay until the very last word. I promise you, the end will make your hands shake. And maybe, just maybe, it'll keep you alive. Like this video. Share it, because if you don't, someone else might walk into their path without knowing what they're dealing with. And I want you to comment what you'd do if you came face to face with them. Would you run? Or would you finally take revenge? We're just getting started. I'll keep digging. I'll keep telling you every detail they don't want you to know. Because this isn't just my revenge anymore. It's ours. Stay with me. Watch till the end. And whatever you do, don't open the door if you hear a child's voice calling your name after midnight. The rain had been falling for 3 days straight when I found the photograph. It was buried under a loose floorboard in the old station house, brittle and yellowed, edges curling inward as if trying to keep its secrets. 2 figures, standing side by side in front of a white church. Elijah's hair slicked back, eyes sharp enough to cut glass. The girl, older now, maybe 16, but with the same unnerving stillness she'd had as a child. Behind them, in the blurred background, I could just make out the face of a man. I recognized him instantly. It was my father. I'd never known he'd been in that town, never heard him speak of it, and yet there he was, staring into the camera with an expression I'd never seen before. A mix of fear and something else, resignation. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the girl's gaze in that photo, fixed now on the camera, but just to the left, as if watching someone approaching. I began to retrace my father's steps, pulling old property records, court filings, anything that could explain why he'd been standing behind those children. That's when I found the sealed folder. No title, no case number. Just my father's initials scrawled on the front. Inside, 3 police reports, all dated within a month of each other. 3 different families, all gone. No sign of forced entry, no sign of struggle. Just empty houses and scratches at the door. The last report was different. It wasn't written by a police officer. The handwriting was my father's. They came for me tonight, but I think I know what they want. If anyone finds this, don't try to fight them. Just give them a name. The page ended there. I sat in my office, staring at those words, the weight of them pressing into me. Give them a name. Whose name? Why mine? The answer came 3 nights later. I was leaving a bar on the edge of town when I saw him. Elijah. He hadn't aged a day since 1987, since that farmhouse break-in. Same sharp suit, same cold, clinical expression. But there was something different this time. A faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. He walked toward me slowly, deliberate, never breaking eye contact. I could feel every hair on my arms stand on end. Your father was smart, he said. His voice was deeper than I remembered, like it had been dragged across gravel. But he made one mistake. I tried to speak, but my mouth was dry. He thought names could save him. Elijah continued. But they only bought him time, and time runs out. Before I could respond, the girl stepped out from the shadows. She looked exactly as she had in that photograph. Not a wrinkle, not a strand of hair out of place. Her eyes flicked to me, and then to the streetlight above us, as if measuring the light. I reached for the gun at my hip, but she tilted her head, almost pitying. "You're not ready," she said softly. They turned and walked away, vanishing into the rain like they'd never been there at all. That night, I dreamed of the scratches on the door again. Only this time, they weren't at knee level. They were higher, human height. When I woke, there was mud on my doorstep, and a piece of paper slid under the door. 3 words in a child's handwriting. "You're next, Elijah." It was then I realized they weren't hunting me. They were using me. The first trap I set wasn't meant to kill them. I'm not arrogant enough to think something as simple as a bullet or a blade could end them. Not after everything I've seen. No, the trap was about control, about making them come to me on my terms. I started with the names. My father's note had been right about one thing. They cared about names. Not just any names, the names of people who had wronged them, or maybe wronged whoever had made them. So I gave them bait. I whispered a name in a place I knew they'd hear it, the old church basement, beneath the peeling paint and warped hymnals. I said it once, loud enough for the sound to carry into the dark. And then I waited. For days, nothing happened. Then, one morning, I found the first sign they'd taken it. A dead crow on my windowsill, its beak wedged open with a sliver of bone. A message. The man whose name I'd given them was gone by nightfall. His truck was still in his driveway, his lights still on, his dinner half-eaten on the table. But the house was empty, just like all the others. I didn't feel guilt. Not anymore. This wasn't about saving anyone. It was about bleeding them dry, making them spend their time and energy on someone other than me. I would keep feeding them names until they made a mistake. But revenge isn't clean. It doesn't move in straight lines. It circles back, drags you into places you thought you'd left behind. 3 weeks after the first trap, I found myself driving down a dirt road I swore I'd never take again, to the farmhouse where their mother had disappeared. The building was a shell now, stripped of siding, roof caving in. But the moment I stepped inside, the air shifted. The living room was empty except for a single wooden chair, positioned in the exact center of the floor. On it, an object I didn't recognize at first. It was a music box, old brass, the kind you wind from the bottom. The figure on top wasn't a ballerina, though. It was a tiny model of the girl. Her face was perfect, down to the tilt of her head. When I wound it, the figure spun slowly, and a tinny lullaby creaked out. But halfway through the song, the melody warped, slowed, deepened until it no longer sounded like music at all. It sounded like words. For words, I know your name. The box kept turning, the figure spinning, but the voice stopped. Something moved upstairs. I drew my gun and took the steps 2 at a time. But when I reached the top, the hallway was empty, except for the smell. Damp earth, and something metallic underneath it. The last door on the left was open just enough to see inside. I pushed it gently, gun raised. The walls were covered in photographs, hundreds of them, overlapping, curling at the edges. All of me. Every year of my life. Every street I'd walked. Every building I'd entered. In the center of the room was a table. On it a jar. Floating inside, a single human eye. It was my father's. That night, the rain came back, heavier than before. I didn't sleep. I sat in the dark, watching the front door. The jar on my kitchen counter a constant reminder. I had underestimated them. I thought I was baiting them, but I was already in their trap. The next morning, I found fresh tracks in the mud outside. Bare feet. 2 sets. They led away from my house, down the road, into the woods. I followed. The forest was silent. The kind of silence that presses against your eardrums. The tracks wove deeper, and then stopped in a small clearing. In the middle of it was a pit, maybe 6 feet across. Inside was the man whose name I'd given them weeks ago. He was alive, barely, his skin pale, lips cracked. When he saw me, he tried to speak, but no sound came. His eyes darted past me, to the trees. I turned. They were there. Elijah stood with his hands in his pockets, eyes locked on mine. The girl was crouched at the tree line, tilting her head the same way she had that night in the rain. "You've been busy," Elijah said, "feeding us scraps, keeping us occupied." He smiled faintly. "Clever." I aimed the gun at him. "Why me?" The girl's voice was soft, almost a whisper. "Because you look like him." I didn't understand at first, but then it hit me, the photo. My father, the man behind them. I wasn't just a target. I was a replacement. Elijah stepped forward, slow, deliberate. "You can end this," he said. "One more name. One more and we leave you." I almost believed him. Almost. But the jar on my counter was proof enough. They didn't leave anyone. The man in the pit groaned, reaching toward me. His fingernails were torn, his skin raw. He mouthed a single word. "Run." But I didn't run, because revenge had taken root in me too deeply. I wasn't done yet. Not until one of them bled. The man in the pit was gone by morning. Not dead gone. No signs of struggle, no footprints, no drag marks. Just empty soil where his body had been. I stood at the edge of that hollow space for an hour, staring down into it, trying to imagine how they'd taken him without a sound. It wasn't until I turned back toward the trees that I realized the mud on the rim of the pit wasn't from the night before. It was fresh. And it wasn't the shape of a human foot. The prints were too long, the toes thin and pointed, more like claws than flesh. That image stayed with me for days. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. My mind kept looping the same question. What were they really? I started digging into old records again, not just in my county, but across the country. Any unsolved disappearance, any report of pale, silent children. It didn't take long to notice the pattern. Every case was separated by exactly 14 years. 1972, 1973, 1974, 1975, and now, each incident followed the same rules. 2 children, 1 male, 1 female, appearing in isolated towns. People vanished. Houses left intact except for broken mirrors and scratches on the inside of doors. No witnesses who survived more than a week after seeing them up close. It was the 14-year cycle that scared me most, because it meant that whatever they weren't random. They were working on a schedule, and we were in the middle of their year. I needed an edge, something they hadn't seen before. The first thing I did was visit the only person I knew who might have answers, a woman named Elsie Bell. She'd been 20 years old in 1972, the year the first report came in, and she'd lived just 2 houses down from the farmhouse where their mother vanished. When I knocked on her door, she didn't answer, but I could see her through the glass, thin, frail, eyes sharp as ever. She motioned for me to come in. Her house smelled like cedar and dust. Photographs lined the walls, but none showed the siblings. In fact, any picture from that era had the corners burned, leaving only the middle visible. She didn't speak until I was sitting across from her at the kitchen table. "You've seen them," she said. I nodded. "Then you're already marked." I asked her what they were. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached into a drawer and pulled out an old, leather-bound book. The pages were brittle, the ink faded, but the drawings were clear. 2 figures, 1 boy, 1 girl, standing in the center of a ring of fire. Above them, symbols I didn't recognize. "They're not children," Elsie said. "They're vessels, empty until something steps inside. Always 2, always bound to each other, and always hungry." I asked about their mother. "She wasn't their mother," Elsie said. "She was their keeper, and when she failed to keep them fed, they replaced her." The way she said replaced made my skin crawl. I pressed her for weakness. She shook her head. "They don't have one. Not like you think. You can't kill them. You can only trap them. But trapping them means taking their place." Before I could ask what that meant, she pushed the book toward me. "Don't come back here. I don't want to see you again." I left with the book in my jacket, the weight of it heavier than it should have been. That night, I studied every page. The symbols repeated over and over, around doors, carved into stones, drawn into dirt. The same ring I'd seen in the first sketch appeared in half the illustrations, always with the boy and girl inside it, and always with someone else outside the ring, someone watching. The more I read, the more one truth sank in. If I wanted to stop them, I'd have to become the bait in a way I hadn't before. Not just offering names, offer myself. The plan took 3 weeks to set. I found a cabin deep in the woods, far enough from town that no one would hear a struggle. I spent days etching the symbols from Elsie's book into the floorboards, the door frames, even the underside of the roof. I salted the thresholds, hung mirrors at every corner, and in the center of the cabin, I painted the ring, exactly as the book described, down to the smallest curl in the design. Inside that ring, I placed a music box from the farmhouse. I had no idea how it had found its way into my truck bed the night after I first wounded, but I didn't question it. Some things just arrive when they're meant to. The first 2 nights passed in silence. On the 3rd, the forest went dead quiet just after midnight. I knew they were here. I sat in the center of the ring, the music box wound and playing its warped lullaby. My gun was on the floor beside me, but I didn't reach for it. The first shadow moved past the window, then another. They circled the cabin for almost 10 minutes, never making a sound. Finally, the door opened without a creak. Elijah stepped in first, the girl just behind him. "You're ready now," Elijah said. The girl's eyes scanned the cabin, pausing on the symbols, on the mirrors, on the salt. She smiled faintly. "You think you understand us," she said. "You don't." They stepped forward, but stopped at the edge of the painted ring. Elijah looked down at it, then back at me. "Where did you get this?" I didn't answer. The girl crouched, reaching a hand toward the ring, but stopped just short of touching it. Her smile faded. "She told you." I didn't have to ask who she meant. The next moment happened so fast, I barely had time to register it. Elijah lunged, but not at me, at the music box. His hand shot forward, stopping inches from it as if hitting an invisible wall. He hissed, actually hissed, like an animal. The girl's voice was sharp now. "You don't know what you're doing." I stood slowly, never breaking eye contact. Maybe not, but I know enough. For the first time, I saw something flicker in Elijah's eyes. Not fear exactly, but something close. He stepped back. The girl followed. They didn't turn to leave, but instead began circling the cabin again, this time faster, their movements blurring. The walls began to creak. The mirrors rattled on their hooks. The salt lines at the windows darkened as if something was soaking through them from outside. I could feel the air thickening, pressing against my chest. My vision tunneled. The music box kept playing, slower and slower, until the melody was almost unrecognizable. Then silence. When I opened my eyes, they were gone. I should have felt relief. Instead, I felt the hair on the back of my neck rise, because on the floor outside the ring, just where Elijah had stood, was a piece of paper. My father's handwriting. It doesn't end here. The cabin burned that night. I don't know if they said it or if the symbols themselves reacted to their presence, but by morning it was ash. The book was gone. So was the music box. And now, every night when I close my eyes, I see them in the distance, standing side by side in a ring of fire, watching me. Only now, I'm not sure if they're outside the ring, or if I am. The first scream was so sudden, so piercing, that it seemed to slice through the night like a blade. It came from the barn. The same barn the townspeople had always avoided, the one with boards that looked like they were rotting from the inside out. In that moment, every ugly whisper about the children felt like it had been true all along. But if you looked closer, if you dared to peel back the layers, you would see that it wasn't the children's doing. It was someone else's hand guiding the nightmare. Samuel had been watching from the window, his face half lit by the dim glow of the oil lamp. The wind outside rattled the shutters, and the sound almost covered the low growl coming from the barn's direction. He knew exactly who had gone in there. He had been waiting for it. For years, they had all whispered behind his back, called him cursed, an abomination, something better left buried in the ground with the rest of his family's shame. Now, the same people who spat at his feet were stumbling into the trap he had built. He hadn't told Clara about this part. She thought revenge would be quick, a clean strike, a single blow that would put an end to their torment. But Samuel wanted more. He wanted them to feel what he had felt. Every sleepless night, every moment of terror, every time they had been locked inside that cellar with no light, no food, no air, just the echo of their own breathing and the weight of something unseen moving in the darkness. That wasn't something you erased in heartbeat. That was something you carved into bone. The man in the barn, Henry Lowell, was one of the worst. He had been one to lead the torchlit march to their house years ago, the one who had shouted for them to be put down like rabid animals. Samuel remembered the spit flying from his mouth, the twisted satisfaction in his eyes. Now, Henry was locked inside with something far hungrier than Samuel's hatred. The screams shifted, less human now, more like the panicked yelping of an animal being torn apart. Clara flinched. "You said you wouldn't," she began, but Samuel cut her off with a look so cold it froze her words. "I said they would pay," he murmured. "This is payment." The night stretched long and heavy. The only movement, the swaying of the trees and the faint, jerking shadows behind the barn's broken window. When the noises stopped, Samuel stood. The door to the barn creaked open, and the thing inside retreated into the far corner, back into the dark. It knew better than to cross him. He had raised it, fed it, kept it hidden when even the ground seemed eager to swallow it whole. The next morning, Henry's body was found half buried in the frost-hardened earth. No one asked how. No one needed to. They all knew in their bones, though they wouldn't dare say it aloud, that the siblings had done it. But the fear in their eyes, the way they stepped aside when Samuel passed, wasn't enough. Not yet. There was still Mrs. Whitcomb, the woman who had gone to the sheriff years ago with a carefully spun tale about the children luring livestock into the woods, about finding the bones laid out in strange patterns. She had been the first to call them beyond science, like they were something filthy, something unnatural. The phrase had stuck, passed from mouth to mouth, until it was the only thing anyone called them. Samuel still remembered standing in the rain outside her house, hearing her laugh with the sheriff like it was all a grand joke. Mrs. Whitcomb liked to keep her curtains open at night, basking in the glow of her oil lamps. Samuel waited until the second week of January, when the snow made every sound muffled and slow. He stood outside her window, unmoving, for hours, knowing she would eventually see him. When she did, her hands froze in the middle of whatever sewing she was doing. Her lips moved, maybe calling for her husband, but she didn't move from her chair. Samuel didn't blink. He just watched, until she couldn't take it anymore and stumbled away from the window. The next morning, her husband found her gone. The door was still locked from the inside. The only sign she had ever been there was her half-finished sewing, the needle still threaded, and a trail of small, wet footprints leading toward the fireplace before stopping abruptly. Claire began to change. She had always been the softer one, the one who believed there was still a chance for peace. But after Mrs. Whitcomb, she stopped speaking to the neighbors entirely. She stopped pretending to smile. She started asking Samuel who was next. The answer was always the same. All of them. The town shrank in spirit. Doors were barred earlier. Children were kept inside, though they whispered about seeing shapes moving along the edge of the fields, shapes too tall and too thin to be anything human. The sheriff tried to organize a watch, but no one wanted to stand out in the cold after dark, not when they could feel the eyes watching from somewhere they couldn't see. Samuel took his time. He knew the rhythm of the town, the way it breathed. He struck in the spaces between its heartbeats. A farmer vanished while walking home from the mill, his lantern found floating in the creek. A merchant was discovered sitting at his desk, eyes wide, lips torn as if from screaming, but not a mark anywhere else on his body. A young boy woke in the middle of the night to find his parents gone, the bedclothes still warm. No one could prove anything, but everyone knew. By the time spring came, the town was a ghost of itself. Houses were abandoned overnight. The church bell, once rung every Sunday, stayed silent. The market square became a place where no one lingered. Samuel walked through it one morning, Claire at his side, and for the first time in years, no one looked at them with contempt. They didn't look at them at all. Eyes dropped, heads turned away. The siblings had finally become what the town had feared all along. Not cursed children, but something far more dangerous, a force to be obeyed. Still, Samuel wasn't satisfied. Fear was only half the payment. The rest was something deeper, something colder. He wanted the town to feel empty, not just of people, but of hope. He wanted the soil to remember their footsteps long after they were gone. He wanted the air itself to feel heavier where they had stood. And so, he began planning something the town wouldn't recover from. Something final. The sound of rain on the tin roof was deafening that night, each drop like a drumbeat counting down to something neither forgiveness nor mercy could stop. The town streets were empty, except for the hollow echo of footsteps, footsteps that belonged to no living soul anyone had ever seen. Somewhere inside the Withers abandoned farmhouse, a candle flickered, throwing shadows against peeling wallpaper like the ghosts were pacing the room, waiting for the moment to strike. They said the siblings had been gone for years, their bodies never found, their names whispered only in hushed tones by those who remembered the horrors. But what no one dared say aloud was that the siblings had never left. They had been watching, waiting, feeding off the guilt of those who betrayed them. It began with small things, doors opening in locked rooms, mirrors cracking without anyone touching them, pets vanishing without a trace. But those who laughed it off didn't laugh long. One by one, people responsible for tearing the siblings apart started to meet their end. Not quick deaths, not merciful ones. Long, drawn-out reckonings where fear bled into their bones and never let go. Jacob Carroll was the first to go. Once a man who claimed he had no part in their suffering, Jacob woke one night to find every photograph in his home altered, his face scratched out, replaced with the pale, hollow-eyed stares of the siblings. He ran, but the siblings didn't chase him. They let the guilt chase him instead. For days he didn't eat, didn't sleep. Then, one morning, they found him in the middle of Main Street, barefoot, muttering. I heard them breathing in the dark, until his last breath rattled out of him. The town called it coincidence, madness, but those who knew, those who had dirt under their nails from burying the truth, felt the cold hand of inevitability on their necks. Sarah Whitmore tried to flee the country when the strange incidents began. She booked a ticket, packed a suitcase, and was halfway to the train station when the sky went black without warning. Thunder shook the ground, and a figure appeared in the distance, not close enough to see clearly, but close enough for her to recognize the way it stood, tilting its head just so. The train never came for Sarah. They found her luggage by the tracks, but she was gone. Only the smell of candle wax lingered in the air, the same scent the siblings' mother had burned in the old farmhouse. Some claimed this was justice. Others called it vengeance. But to the siblings, it was simply balance, restoring what had been broken, taking back what was stolen, making sure those who had played God understood that no one walks away from the blood they spill. The revenge wasn't quick. It stretched over months, years even. Time itself bent around it. People aged in fear. The streets grew quieter, and the farmhouse, once abandoned, began to breathe again. Light flickering in the windows, the sound of footsteps echoing from upstairs rooms. The more the guilty tried to ignore it, the louder it became. One night, Reverend Harris, who had preached that the siblings were unnatural and marked by sin, woke to find his own sermon carved into the walls of his bedroom, every word dripping with fresh blood. His wife swore she saw two figures standing in the corner, one smiling, the other weeping silently. The next morning, the Reverend's bed was empty. The sheets were cold. The front door was wide open. It wasn't enough for the siblings to take lives. They took memories, too. They erased photographs from albums, names from gravestones, whole bloodlines from records. The guilty became ghosts before they were even dead. The siblings' revenge wasn't about killing. It was about making the world forget the people who wronged them ever existed. And yet, for all the horror, there were those who claimed the siblings were not evil. They were, in their own twisted way, protecting something, punishing betrayal, yes, but also defending the helpless, those who had suffered at the hands of the same people. To these few, the siblings were angels cloaked in darkness. To everyone else, they were the last thing you saw before the world went cold. Now, if you're watching this, you might think you're safe, that these were just stories told in some cursed little town far from here. But that's where you're wrong. The siblings' revenge is not bound by place or time. They follow guilt. They follow whispers. And guilt, once it takes root, travels faster than any train, faster than the wind through an open window. And here's the truth most will never tell you. You don't need to have harmed them directly to be marked. If you stood by, if you knew and did nothing, if you ever turned away when someone begged for help, that's enough. They remember. They always remember. So ask yourself right now, as you sit there in the safety of your home, what have you done that would make them come for you? Whose cries did you ignore? Whose suffering did you pretend not to see? Because if you feel it, the chill creeping up your spine, the heaviness in the air, it's already too late. They've found you. You'll smell the candle wax before you see them. You'll hear the floorboards creak before they speak your name. And when they do, you'll understand why no one survives the siblings' justice. If you're still here, still watching, then I need you to do one thing. Share the story. Spread it like wildfire, because the more people who know, the more time you might buy yourself. Like this video so the warning reaches further. Leave a comment, even if it's just a name. The name of someone who wronged you, someone who needs to know the siblings are watching. And don't just click away. because the siblings hate being ignored. Watch until the very last second, because maybe, just maybe, they'll spare those who listened all the way through. But deep down, you know the truth. They never spare anyone.